Choices. Choices, choices, choices. All of life is made up of choices. One day last week, Brother Spike texted me, wanted to know choices to have a family dinner in Frankfurt. So I gave him a few of our select eateries in the town, and I think you enjoyed a good one. Choices. In Warsaw, we don't have quite as many as we do in Frankfurt. Frankfurt, we don't have as many in Lexington, Louisville, Cincinnati. Choices. What are you going to wear when you get out of bed in the morning? What are you going to do today? Bigger choices. What are you going to do with your talents in your life? What kind of job are you going to do? What are you going to pursue in your life? How are you going to use your talents? Some of these things are fairly simple, but others are lots more complicated and lots more involved in the depth and the matter, the makeup of life. They're long-range ones. Today, I want us to focus on a choice that likely most of us have to make one way or another quite regularly. It's whether to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing. Think, oh no, that's me. That's not me. I always do the right thing. I always do the right thing now. Bob says he doesn't always do the right thing. Well, we know we don't always do the right thing. Sometimes we make mistakes, but we have the choice. There's the choice that's there, and maybe it's just at that particular moment, in a split second, when we have to make the choice to go one way or the other. Sometimes we are faced with the notion of, do we make the choice to go to the right, or is it something maybe that's just a little bit shady? And this is about you and me and you and all the world. We're not talking here today about politicians. We're not talking about whether it's this side or that side or what. That's not what we're talking about. Because it forever seems that whatever political party is in power, the other one is demeaning that one. Then when the power changes, it goes the other way. So that's just part of the fabric of life that we would hope we could get past. I want you to think about the choices that you make, the choices that are ones that can affect your life for the moment and perhaps longer term than that. This Psalm 84, I know I say this every week. This is one of my favorite passages of Scripture, and a lot of them are. This one is, I want to read it all to you, but I want to focus, or at least part of it, I want to focus on the 10th verse. Psalm 84, how lovely is thy dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, yea, faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and flesh sing for joy of the living God. Isn't that beautiful? Doesn't that give you quite an image? Even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young at thy altars, O Lord of hosts, my King, my God. Blessed are those who dwell in thy house. Blessed are those that ever singing thy praise. Blessed are the men whose strength is in thee and whose heart are in the highways to Zion. As they go through the valleys, they make a place in the spring. The early rain also covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength. The God of gods will be seen in Zion. O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Behold our shield, O God. Look upon the face of thine anointed. And this is the verse that is the focus of our day, at least part of it. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. Other versions say, I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than rule in hell. That's really a strong statement there. That's really something that offers us a real challenge. Now, juxtaposed against that, this choice. I would rather be a doorkeeper in heaven than be the ruler in hell. Juxtaposed against that is Lucifer, Satan. Those of you who have studied English literature have read at least a portion of John Milton's epic poem, Paradise Lost. Written in 1667, it's 10 books long. When they say epic, they weren't kidding, because it was huge, gigantic. But that's the way people wrote back then. We didn't have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of these other things. The only way that people wrote was to write with their little bitty hands. That's what they did. This story is of the fall of Lucifer and from heaven as an angel and his reigning in hell. Called Paradise Lost, it's a poem that, if you're taking notes on the matter anywhere, it's written in what's called free verse. In other words, free verse means it doesn't rhyme, like Mary had a little lamb, fleece was white as snow. It doesn't rhyme. It's just line after line after line. In this story, this blank verse story, Lucifer, an angel in heaven, disagrees with God about sharing power, about how he can have some of the action that is in heaven. A fight ensues. Who typically wins fights with God? God wins. So Lucifer gets the boot. He's kicked out of heaven in Paradise Lost. He goes to the eternal place of eternal damnation, and he there takes up the mantle that he is going to rule in this place. Where in the psalm, the saying is, I'd rather be a gatekeeper in heaven. In here, the line that sticks with Lucifer is this one. It would be better, rather, let me get it right. It's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Now think of that. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. What kind of person does this? What kind of angel has fallen so far to be able to say, I would rather do that than be there and serve with God? I want to read you a little bit of some of the commentary on this. I'm not going to try to paraphrase it. I'm going to read it. So stay with me. The commentary says on it, some that I've read, better to reign in hell is a notion with the implication that a person would prefer to be the most prominent, powerful, apparently successful, or even free among a destitute people in a desolate environment. A person would prefer that kind of thing. The person would prefer that than to live in the anonymity, lesser accomplishments, in relative terms, or in service despite being surrounded by a quiet environment with reasonable personal attainment. In other words, it would be better to take a little bit seat back in the choir, so to speak, further back, than to rule. This is the choice that Lucifer had. This is the choice that you have. Lucifer, traditionally, has been the wreaker of a lot of havoc. After he took over in heaven, or hell rather, it's Lucifer that's credited with coming back to Adam and Eve in the garden in Genesis. He appears as a snake. He tempts Eve, tempts Adam. They eat from the tree of life. They're kicked from the garden. He's done his deal. He has caused man to fall, as the scriptures tell us. Lucifer's done his job. He's truly reigning in hell. He just has really created a whole lot of havoc. And then suddenly Adam realizes, first of all, that he and Eve don't have on any clothes. Before, that didn't make any difference. But suddenly they're grabbing up fig leaves. They're looking for places to hide. They can't find any way to get that. They're embarrassed, so to speak, because Lucifer has pointed out to them that there's something less, that this is where they ought to be, that they ought to be in charge, that they ought to be in charge, that they ought to rule the garden. God shouldn't be able to tell you not to eat of that tree. God shouldn't be able to tell them not to do this, don't do that. God shouldn't be able to tell them that. They ought to make their own decisions. What happens when God comes to visit with Adam and Eve in the garden? Biblical scholars will remember that they hide from him because of their nakedness. Before they didn't. They hide from God because they know they've done something wrong. Well, when I was young, those of you who are all along the way, we know that sometimes when we make mistakes, when we do things that we shouldn't, we try to hide from our parents. We try to keep it from them. Even as adults, we try to hide things. That's the whole point of the law practice, isn't it, Spike? Brian? People are trying to hide they did something that they shouldn't do, and it's just a matter of finding out how they did it, and who did it, and who got hurt in the process, and how bad it's going to hurt. That's what happens in the law. The law has to find out what went wrong in this situation. So be it. Here. So be it. God has seen his creation tumble. And he has to assure Adam and Eve that the creation will be saved. That the creation will be saved with the coming of Jesus. But before that, there's going to be a whole lot of turmoil, a whole lot of problems. All this reported in the book of Genesis. Now, I'm not here to argue or to debate the efficacy of how accurate all of that is. It's a wonderful story, and it actually is the way things are. Because aren't we still trying to figure out what our relationship is to God, our relationship to our fellow man? Jesus is going to come and will save them. You've got the picture. It's as Captain Hook. You remember Captain Hook? He was in a famous movie too, I think, one time, called Peter Pan, and he had all these little boys, and he was trying to make pirates out of them. Do you remember? And he puts them on a gangplank on his boat, and he said, here's the choice, boys. You either become a pirate or walk the gangplank. Become a pirate or walk the gangplank. And the chorus in the movie goes, and the choice is up to you. Hence the title of this message. The choice is up to you. It's laid out here before us. We have the opportunity to serve in heaven. And we have the opportunity to support those who rule in hell. Every choice we make, we need to weigh one against the other. Is this going to hurt? How is this going to happen? How are we going to make this work out the way that it should? Juxtaposed with Milton, again, we have Psalm 84 and the rendition in Milton, which is not biblical, of course, but just his observation of it, his idea. The good on one hand, the bad on the other. How do we in our lives work those things out? And we're going to leave it right there so Shirley can make her way to the piano. Because the hymn of invitation, she always writes me and says, I don't know what songs to pick out for this crazy stuff that you decide to preach on. She doesn't really say that, but I know that's what she means if you nailed her down with it. Is trust and obey. The hymn is 556 in your bulletin. And this hymn, I will say to you, the words of this hymn are reminiscent and point out and direct and focus to the notion to say there's somebody bigger than you. There's somebody that's more important than you. There's somebody that we need to trust in. And for us, for those of us who believe in God, trust and obey, for there's no other way.